Hey guys, it's Items Farmhouse and welcome to this brand new Sketchup speed build. So today I'm building a modern Dutch lake villa because I felt like it would be cool if for once I would do a different kind of modern build. As you know, often I do the tropical modern builds, which is cool and which is a style that I really like. It's one of my favorite styles, but since I'm Dutch and since I also wanted to do something different, I thought it would be cool if I would create a typical modern Dutch house. And I must say, Dutch people like architecture, or at least you can't say for everyone, of course, but as you might know, there are quite some famous Dutch architects. Design is something we're good at, something we like. Talking about architects, for instance, Rem Koolhaas from Office of Modern Architecture is Dutch, so that's like one of the biggest architecture firms. So also just design is something that's almost in our blood. So design is something we like, and therefore you have very many cool modern houses in the Netherlands. I've not recreated anything in this video, which is also not what the goal was. Whereas in The Sims 4, if you watch those videos, sometimes I create buildings from all around the world in the Around the World building series. This is not really like that. This is just what I felt like would look like a Dutch house, and later on you will notice what the reason for that is, because you might wonder what is a Dutch house. Well, it could be built anywhere because modern architecture can almost be built anywhere, but the use of bricks the way I did, and also the positioning of it along the water is very typical for Dutch modern architecture, or at least that's the way I feel. So I thought, I'm just going to call it a Dutch modern house, which I thought would be sort of a cool, just would be cool to do something different every now and then. And this time it's a Dutch house. So if you have a suggestion for some kind of modern architecture I should check out, please leave it in the comments down below, because I'm definitely able to just look into it and see what it is like, and maybe it's a possibility. I am only doing modern builds because modern is much easier to do in SketchUp than traditional. Traditional design just takes a lot longer, and also it's not really something I like a lot, so therefore, I prefer to keep it on the modern side because that's just really my style. So yeah, in the previous SketchUp speed build I built a Balinese house, or a Balinesian house, which is pretty interesting actually, because I'd been there just after or just before I created that video, which was the reason that I was inspired to create a Balinese house. And it's funny because this time I'm building a house from a specific country again as well, though Bali is of course only an island, but still it's a specific, it's Indonesia, so it's an Indonesian house actually, so a specific country. But yeah, that video wasn't that long ago, so yeah, recently I've really been into SketchUp, and I thought I really got some great replies and comments on that other SketchUp speed build, which motivated me to create new ones, and this is one of them. Well, I only created one extra one since then, because I can't create several SketchUp speed builds at once, sort of, because that just simply takes too much time, and also otherwise I don't finish one because I prefer one over the other. So whenever I do a SketchUp speed build, I just create one at a time. But when I look back, I noticed that the previous SketchUp speed builds I'd done often were 2 months apart from each other, and this one is like within 2 weeks, I believe, so that's pretty good. But that's just because I was really excited to continue working on SketchUp again, and I was just very happy reading all the positive comments, because I really noticed that you were all very involved and people were just commenting on the videos, which is what I like. So here you really see the building taking shape already. The reason it went this fast was because I made a quick sketch of the layout already, because as you just saw, I also focused on the layout for this house. That's what I often do nowadays. Back in the day I just only focused on the exterior, but nowadays I realize that it's not very realistic only to focus on the outside, because then it might be too small or not have like a very logical shape. But in this case, I just also did the interior, well, not the furniture, but just the layout and the floor plan. because I thought, that's cool, and I did so. And because I already drew it out, I knew exactly what I wanted to create. And currently, I'm creating the part of this house that's like most special about it, that will catch everyone's eye, which I think is really cool because it's a huge door, or actually two huge opening doors into the garden. Made out of glass, which are 2 stories high, which I personally think is one of the coolest things ever. For that aspect, it might not be the most typical Dutch house, but at the same time it is, because, for instance, with the Balinese house, it had like a very open plan. This house doesn't have that, because Dutch houses generally don't have that, or at least I know no Dutch house which is like very open, simply because the weather here isn't very good and you can almost never live in such a way. But something like this is like very well possible, I think, though it is something you have to really like. And yeah, it might not be the most functional thing, I realize, but to be honest, I only came up with the idea of calling this the Dutch house like halfway through the process of creating it. So I didn't start off like, okay, I'm going to create a Dutch house. It was just when I started doing the textures that I realized, oh, this is starting to look like a Dutch modern house. So in the end, that's what I decided to name it. But yeah, those opening doors are just really cool. I was inspired by this from the internet. I don't exactly know where I got the inspiration from, what the source was, but it was maybe if you follow architecture stuff on Instagram, you definitely know that picture, because it's just a city urban house with those opening doors into the garden, and that's what I wanted to implement in this house as well. And generally the windows are just very modern, but the frames are sort of detailed as well. So I really put a lot of effort into creating good looking windows for this house. As you can see, I'm really doing my best to create the frames as cool as possible and as detailed as possible. So yeah, in the end, that looked pretty cool. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, by the way, you can. You have to look for Dutch Sims 4 Master, and there you see me posting updates on new videos, and also you see pictures of me and whenever I travel or whatever. So if you're interested in that, you can always check it out. And of course, you can subscribe here so that you see it whenever I upload a new Sketchup or Sims video, which would be cool as well. So recently I've been working on a few projects again. I actually did some sort of conference business call about one of the projects, which was pretty cool. So this is seriously starting to escalate these SketchUp projects into some serious business, I guess, which is really what I like. So if you have any SketchUp project, then feel free to send me an email. It's mainly like conceptual design. I'm not an architect. That's something you have to know. So I don't know the technical side of things, but I am able to create. I have the knowledge of SketchUp, and I can create cool looking designs. So if you have like a piece of land and you'd like to have a conceptual design for that, then you can always send me an email and I can see if I can help you out. So the email is in the description down below. Here we're working on the other side. This is the front of the house, and again I'm using those windows which don't really have like corner pieces, sort of. They're like infinity windows, if that's what you'd call it. That's what I decide to call it. I don't think there's even a name for these kind of windows, but I just thought it would look cool, and in real life you see them every now and then as well. Often there is some kind of framing, but it's just not very visible, so this is the way I try to implement that. In the end, this is a lakeside modern villa. Currently you don't see the lake yet, but that's coming later on, because obviously I just first wanted to create the house because I felt like that was the part you would be most interested in, and then afterwards I would go into doing the terrain, because the terrain does take quite some time. And also it's important to make sure that the house is perfect before I start creating the terrain, because otherwise the house might not fit well on it. Also one unrealistic thing about this house, or at least unrealistic in the fact that I added an infinity pool to this house, because infinity pools are sort of my trademark, I guess, because all my houses always have infinity pools, just because I think those are the coolest things ever, including hanging chairs, which I discovered with my previous Sketchup speed build, and which I still also think are some of the coolest things out there. So I added them in this one again, but different hanging chairs, because you've got so many different kinds of hanging chairs that I can go on forever. But yeah, like I said, the weather in the Netherlands, and if you're Dutch, you'll definitely know that, isn't that good. And therefore, the infinity pool isn't the most realistic thing to add in the house. But still, you know, I thought it looks cool. And there are people who have a pool in the Netherlands, definitely. But it's personally not something I would necessarily want here, because, yeah, it is pretty expensive and you can't use it that much. But yeah, you know, this house is generally pretty luxurious already, so I felt like a pool would be something that would fit well. So yeah, the focus is really on the back of the house. I'm starting with the front right now, but as always, actually, the front is always a little bit... Yeah, the focus is just not on the front with houses I create in SketchUp, simply because I always just really like to create the back side, because there you can have like cool landscaping. You can really promote the atmosphere of the house, even though the front is, or just because the front has to be sort of private and simpler, and you don't have the cool views. So yeah, that's just a thing. But here I am adding just some windows again, and the door 2 levels again. Well, the door is only 1 level, but the window and the door together form like a 2-level tall window, sort of, which opens into a 2-story entrance area or foyer, which I thought would be pretty cool. We've got stairs going up from there. I didn't do the interior, by the way, because seriously, rendering interiors, yeah, that's just such a pain in the ass, simply because the program can't run it, or at least the program can, but my computer can't. And I have seriously quite a strong computer, because normally regular renders are very hard to do already, but my computer can do it. But interior renders, you have to add so many pieces of furniture, which really make the file so much bigger. That's also the problem that occurs when doing exterior renders. Sometimes they take like ages before, and I can't like touch my computer while it's doing it, because otherwise it will crash, simply because I'm adding like a boat or a car or a chair, which is simply very big and made in like a very complex way with like curves and corners and stuff. And then the file of only that car is just like 10 times bigger than the entire house. But I do want to add it because it looks cool, and therefore it's just very slow. But if I have to do that for the interior, I have to do it separately for every room, and I simply don't really have time for that. And also, that's not really the part of the design that I do, if you ask me. I personally really prefer doing the exterior, which is what I simply focus on. So as you can see here, I did the front. Yeah, in the end, the front did turn out to look cool. I actually created quite a cool render of it as well, or 2 renders, which you'll see at the end of the video as usual. So I'm happy with that, but the front is really where the focus is, and that's always just the case. And I personally think with lake houses, also in the Netherlands, that is actually in reality also the case, because people living there sort of want to show off their house as well, you know, showing people like wealth and showing them how cool their house is, and then you want people to see that from the water, and then you want the front to be private because you don't want anyone to be able to look into your house from the road, but from the water it's like much farther away. That's sort of the way I thought about it. So this is the moment I'm starting working on the terrain, or just the exterior, the landscaping, which is pretty cool as well. I use the same style, I use the same style as I did with the modern Miami waterside villa, something like that. I'm not sure what I called it, but it was like one of my most recent speed builds, the one where I built like a Miami waterside villa. And there I also created like this place where you can put the boat, and yeah, just, what do you call it? The duck, I think. Not duck, but duck. Is that the way that's the way you should pronounce it, but it sort of sounds like duck. But anyways, that's sort of what I focused on for this one as well, because I thought that looked really cool in that one, in that render and that design I did. So here you see me adding those poles alongside the duck. And then to the right side, in a few seconds, you'll see me adding the infinity pool. So if you have any suggestions for me what to do, or maybe tutorials for SketchUp, because I often see people talking about tutorials for SketchUp, and of course I do the rendering tutorials, but that's also because a company asked me to create those tutorials, because I know that for many of you they might not be very useful, but it's sort of like a sponsorship. But I can also create like regular SketchUp videos or regular SketchUp tutorials. But then you have to give me a suggestion for what I could do, because I honestly don't really know what you'd like me to do, because there's so much in SketchUp which personally I also don't know, because yeah, I can learn something new every time I create a new build, simply new shortcuts, but also just new techniques or stuff. And recently I actually looked up some other tutorials on YouTube as well, which taught me some like more advanced stuff with shapes, which is pretty interesting. And also I don't know everything about SketchUp, but yeah, if you want this tutorial, you have to be sort of specific. And also I personally prefer to create like creative videos in which I create something which looks cool, rather than teaching people stuff, because I personally really prefer looking at someone who creates something. The tutorials are useful as well, but often you can find other tutorials on YouTube. But if there's anything you'd like to see me doing, then just let me know, and I could try to create a tutorial like that. So I think here I'm starting to add the textures, and I looked up some new textures on the internet this time, and they really looked cool. And like I said, I added brick, and normally I really don't like brick, and that's also the reason why I don't necessarily like Dutch houses, because Dutch houses are often made up of brick, even though I'm not too sure about that, because I just don't really like it. But for this one, I really liked it, because this is a type of brick which I liked. So yeah, that's the reason why I still like this house, even though it has brick. But yeah, here I also added a fence, because I was sort of done with all the window fences, or the glass fences I mean, simply because yeah, I used it all the time, and I felt like it would be cool to use something different. So on the warehouse, I looked up fence, and then this came up, and that was actually perfect for this house. It suits the house very well, so I'm adding it in the front as well. But I believe I didn't record that part, simply because it's sort of boring for you to watch. Yeah, still looking back at that fence, I'm very happy that I added that one, because it really fits the house very well. Also because the window frames are black and the fence is black, and sort of the windows are sort of industrial, and also that fence is sort of industrial. But I'm very curious. Here I'm adding the textures, I think. Yep, there we go. There we've got the brick texture, which I personally think is really cool. And from this moment I realized, okay, it's going to be a Dutch house. And it's going to be a Dutch well, I already knew it was going to be a lakeside house, but now I knew it was a Dutch lakeside house. And actually it's pretty cool, because this is really some sort of different style because of this different material. Also, this is the first SketchUp build like ever, seriously ever, in which I didn't add palm trees, because palm trees are very specific for the Netherlands, or at least like it wouldn't be a Dutch house if it would have palm trees, because almost no one has palm trees here, because they do grow, but only in pots, I believe, not just in the ground or in the soil. So yeah, it's just not usual to have palm trees, and I thought, I've got to, make sure that I can also create houses without palm trees. So I did, and in the end, it looked pretty cool. I also want to create a Greek house someday, like a modern Santorini or a Mykonos house. If you look that up, they're so cool. I really like these houses in Santorini, built up on the hill with the blue and still the white, because they're so simple. They look really cool, but adding like a modern touch would be really cool, if you ask me. So maybe someday I'm going to create that in SketchUp as well. And then actually I'm often referring to some place when creating something, but that's also because I'm creating houses from like a specific style, and therefore often a style comes from a country, and then in that way, yeah, it ends up being like a Dutch house or a Balinese house. Or I also did an Ibiza villa, that's what you should call it in English, I believe. But yeah, here I'm just adding some new grass as well, but it turned out that it didn't really work out that well with the texture when curving it, so I decided, okay, that I'm just gonna put like a true angle in it, because in the end, in the renders, you didn't even very clearly see it. It might have even looked better than having like that cool arc, so in the end I was happy that it worked out. So yeah, just some terrain stuff, and I really like the duck in the front also because it's very hard to create beaches in SketchUp because they simply don't really look good, and it's very hard to edit terrain, or at least for me it is, because I don't really know how to do it, or there are like extensions for it but I don't use those. Maybe I should start doing so because that would make it easier, but that is very hard to run as well, I believe, and that takes a lot of time. Therefore, creating like ducks in front of the house, in that way you can still have the water aspect, which I really like, because personally for me my dream house is definitely along the water. But what was I saying? Yeah, but having water without having a beach, because creating beaches is just very hard, and in that way the surroundings don't necessarily look very good. But in this way you can have the water and you don't need to add a beach, because you can add like, yeah, what do you call it? Like a duck, like I did here. Also, I thought it would be cool to add some curved shapes to sort of contrast with the diagonal and straight lines in the rest of the design. Because generally this is like a very futuristic modern design, especially if you look at the roof, which I think is cool, but I thought to sort of contrast that with the curves in the patio. But anyways, this is the end of the designing part, or the speed build part. And now we go over in a few seconds to the renders. So here I'm just finishing up some last things, trying to make that lake look good. And then here we get the first render. I personally think they really turned out to look cool, and I'm just very happy with these renders. You also see the hanging chair on this one. So if you liked watching this video, please let me know that you did. Also, don't forget that you can subscribe and also like this video. So that means leave a thumbs up, because in that way it will go up the ranks, and in that way I can create more of these kinds of videos. So I hope you enjoyed watching it, and then also I hope to see you back in another video later. Bye bye.